Welcome back to WagerTalk.com. I'm Marco D'Angelo, joined in studio with Mike Tenay. These are going to be a couple fun videos we're going to do. Mike Tenay, if you recognize that name, you've been a wrestling fan over the years, they know who you are. What a lot of people may not know is you're also the host of a new podcast that I'll tell you what's getting rave reviews, Professor Vegas Podcast. You had me on as a guest earlier this year. It was a very fun podcast to do. And you're doing something different, Mike, with this podcast where you're covering everything. It's like, the convenience store of podcasts because you get everything you want at one place. It's great. I'm not going to steal your thunder. I'm going to let you talk about it. But before we get to the podcast, you've been in Vegas for a long time. You moved to Vegas in what,
1986.
1986. Your first trip out here to Vegas, though, was when?
Oh, gosh. First trip would have been in the 1960s, early 60s as a kid, yes.
And kind of fascinated with the town?
Absolutely loved it. And I remember just wandering into a sports book at like the age of 10 or 12, downtown Las Vegas off of Fremont Street, sitting in the back row and thinking, man, this is for me.
And I tell you what, we had lunch last week and you told me some of your stories and, people use the phrase timing is everything. And I tell you what, man, you were at the right place at the right time a lot in your lifetime. And you started out at the Gold Coast as a ticket writer in the race book. Pretty neat story how you started there, and even neater how you got promoted.
Yeah, kind of a crazy set of circumstances all along with many of the different jobs that I've had. But I was in Los Angeles. I was selling heating and air conditioning equipment, and very, very good job. But I just didn't have the passion for it. And I loved the race and sportsbook industry. Happened to see that the community college in Las Vegas had sort of an introductory class. I remember going in the first day and the instructor is up at the top and writing on the chalkboard, win, place, and show. Here's the definitions, exacta and quinella. And I remember looking around the class and I realized that the instructor had reversed the definitions of exacta and quinella. And 60 people in the class, nobody had an idea what was going on. And I thought, is this the time really? 5 minutes into day one? But I raised my hand. I said, I hate to correct you, but you've got quinella and exacta reversed. One of those things where at that point, I think the instructor felt maybe a little bit of a comfort zone with me as opposed to really being upset that they were corrected. And they hired 5 people out of that class to come and work at the Gold Coast when the Gold Coast opened, and I was one of them.
Great, and then you weren't a ticket writer for long. You moved up the ladder pretty quick.
Yeah, fortunate set of circumstances here as well. One of the bosses who for years had worked at the Barbary Coast as a ticket writer wanted to become a boss. And within the first month or so, they happened to catch him stealing money. But what he was doing is he was stealing dollar bills out of a box that we had where we would get daily racing form deposits. So it's like the Rodney Dangerfield story of his dad getting fired from the bank for stealing pencils.
Yeah.
But fortunately, they had an opening. They moved me into management, and I ended up working for about 11 years at the Gold Coast.
Yeah, and then one night, a friend had you on a radio show. You went after your shift at the Gold Coast to go and be a guest on a show, and you started talking about wrestling on the show. And tell us what happened.
Yeah, in 1991, he was doing the midnight to 6 Pacific shift. It was just when sports talk radio was taking off. And about an hour and a half in, he said, can we talk about when you were a kid? I know you worked in the wrestling office in Los Angeles. And it was crazy. Every phone line lit up. Fortunately, the owner of the radio network had insomnia that night. He knew that the host, Jay Richards, was having a difficult time getting calls. Jay was basically reading the USA Today sports section on the air. We had all 7 lines lit up. People called in. They loved the ability to get the inside information on wrestling. Pre-internet days, there really wasn't any place that they could go to get this kind of information. And the owner of the network contacted me the next day, offered me my own job as a radio host, and I was able to be a radio host in Las Vegas for a national radio show about 6 years. And that was the springboard to getting a shot on TV initially with Ted Turner and Turner Broadcasting.
All right. Well, we're going to leave the wrestling for the next video. We'll drop it off there. But right now, you're doing the Professor Vegas podcast. And as I said, it's like a convenience store of everything you need if you're, sports. Tell us what you've got on it. Give us a minute summary of the.
Got it.
Professor Vegas podcast.
Yeah, sort of one-stop shopping, I guess. It's for CBS Radio in New York City. And when they approached me about doing a podcast, I knew that the wrestling business, there's so many big names from Ric Flair to Steve Austin that have podcasts these days. And I happened to see that CBS did not have anything related to sports betting. What I have is almost like an audio magazine each week related to sports betting and fantasy football. We have experts from fantasy football. We have Jimmy Vaccaro from the South Point. He comes in and gives the bookies POV. He lets you know whether the casinos won, whether the bettors won. In addition to that, we do a news segment where we take the top news stories in sports that week, relate it to Las Vegas and how it affects the gambling industry. And then we also have a special guest who will come in, like we had with yourself a couple of weeks back, where we'll handicap games. So a little bit of something for everybody.
It's great. In the Jimmy Vaccaro section, you know, he's so funny, and people love to hear that. And they love whenever he comes on and says that the books got hammered. The fans
It gives
like
them hope.
It gives them hope, that's for sure. All right. Sorry we had to cut you short on that one, but we wanted to save some time for the next video because that's the one that most people know you from. So stay tuned, find out about Mike Tenay in his wrestling days. And guys, don't forget, every Tuesday at Wager Talk, it's $2 Tuesday. You can get one best bet from a featured handicapper. We change it around every week, offer you one of our top plays for just $2 every Tuesday at wagertalk.com.